Okay, it's Tuesday, October 11th. This is an end of the day SPY recap. First of all, looking at the daily chart, you can see it was another red day to the downside, a 2 down day, taking out the low yesterday and essentially holding the midpoint of the prior day. In a second, I will get to the actual activity intraday, which I think was probably very confusing for some people, but in terms of the way I look at things and I view the strat combined with my approach to look at the pre-market range and the opening price action, it's actually it was a perfect example of why you can use all that together to really know pretty much exactly what's going on. But first, let me just start with a very simple big picture view, and then we'll get to the details of today. In terms of the big picture, it's pretty clear now what's going on. First of all, on the weekly chart, we did come down on the 2 down week and take out our target, which is lower the prior week. So at that point, we're either going to get continuation or failure going down. And we know if we get continuation, we have lower targets here relative to the monthly chart, which is the a big red bar that finally moved a little bit below its low. So that kind of achieved the objective. Once you saw the end of the month, last month red, you had a feeling you'd take out the lows. And again, if we continue, there's targets here and there's deeper targets down there in time. But what has to, for that continuation to take place at this point, it's very clear now. I have this green line. That is the open of the week. Of the month. So when you go back here, this was the first day of October. This is where it opened. We were green for a little bit to start the month, but we were still anticipating all that red because of what I just showed you. We had the a shooter bar from last week. We had that monthly red bar that you thought would continue lower. So even this upstart to the month, we were just looking at broadening action, waiting for it to come down. This was the clear day to the breakout of consolidation where we went down. Now we've continued lower ever since, and we've kind of reached our short-term target. So to me, as long as we stay below the open of the month, which is this green line, which now it kind of lines up with the midpoint of today, then our monthly chart stays red and we're going to be biased to the downside. So until we break above that area and hold there, then, we just completely have a downward bias, and we'll play each day accordingly. If we break above, then this would be a 2-up day tomorrow. Then we'll start looking at targets and what may be developing and how that relates to the weekly bar. And again, I'm waiting for that weekly bar to turn up, which would require kind of, now that it's a 2-down week, it would require some kind of move up, then a 2-up week next week to really even begin to start thinking to the upside. Now, in terms of today, why this is just a beautiful example of the strat, which really incorporates two main things. When you know the strat, you're looking at multiple time frames and you're looking at broadening action. And once you have those two things in mind, that's the beauty of the strat, and I recommend everyone learn it as a primary tool. For me, it's the foundation of what I do. This is why the concept of broadening action made so much sense today as what developed. And then, the multiple time frames I just went over. On the daily chart, we knew we took out our target right out of the gate. So that means you could, the important thing was that was the target. So that's why early in the day, you were expecting it to go down there. And we know what the monthly chart has to do now to either stay down or go up. So that's the multiple time frame aspect. But the broadening aspect is what happened today, where if you look at it, think about it, lower low, higher high, lower low. And this would be very confusing to a lot of people. And we did this back in here. We had this whole period in here we were doing that, and it was confusing, but it was actually very easy to follow day by day. And then how that really aligned with my approach, how I kind of have a quasi-strat approach, I like to call it, where I look at the opening price action and then I judge what happens from there. The first bar, so with that in mind, and the pre-market, range that I always talk about. So we have this range with the two blue lines. That's our pre-market range, the high or low. Typically, to get a down session, you want to get below that and stay below that and go down all day. Up session, you go above that and stay above that all day. And usually it starts right from the start of the day, but there are a lot of videos on that. But anyway, regarding today, what happened was you got the first bar that ended up red as we were kind of drifting off the highs pre-market to start the session. And we followed through. So there was a short trade, and it took out our target, which is kind of both the low of the week that we were talking about. I talked about how that was really a target that was high probability, and also the pre-market low. And then we get the reversal. I put out a morning video an hour into trading showing you how I'd be out of the market, maybe breaking even on any short trade because of the way this bar formed. We didn't get the follow through like we did the day before, with momentum. So then we were going to wait and see whether or not we continue. If we just paused here around the midpoint of that first bar and then had a red bar, reversal, you would have went short again and then expected this low to be taken out and maybe follow through in line with the bigger picture down. But instead, price moved up and took out the intraday high. I talked about that as a possibility before it happened. And I said, once that happened, at that point, you're likely to be heading. This is my approach now, that we're looking likely. And this is also the broadening, and it aligns with the broadening action. Once you're coming up here and you take out that first bar high, kind of in the middle of a range, well, then it looks like you're probably going to broaden up higher. So I discussed that, and I actually bought calls here for that move up, and I took advantage of that. Now, as we're watching it, I was also shooting a video once we got up to that target, how at this point, this is critical. Are we going to really follow through strongly and take out the midpoint of this prior day to get up to the high of that day? Or is that going to be kind of a failure area? Because I see not only, well, it's not on this chart now, but there was a little after market high close to that, which it took out. That was this bar here. Then it came down a little bit, started up again, and I was discussing how these bars here are all stops that could be taken out. And that's right near the midpoint of yesterday. And the question is, if we take that out, are we going to, at that point, if we hold, we're going to probably continue high. But we just took them out, then kind of failed or paused, as you expect when you take out liquidity. And then we started up again, but couldn't really go anywhere. And then all of a sudden, we broke down below the pre-market high. And at that point, I kind of knew that we're just failing up here in general. Did I know for sure we're going to have a big bar down? No, but I actually anticipated that. I bought some meta puts that were holding nicely, and they moved up nicely once this move happened. Then we came down, and what do? We broadened out again. We took out the low of the day. So once we broke down, it's not surprising that, within the last hour or so of trading, we came and took out the lows of the day and then closed where we closed. So now it's a matter of going into tomorrow, knowing that the midpoint of yesterday, of today, is kind of aligns with the green line, which is the opening of the month. So if we start up strong tomorrow, it's possible we can start getting green going up, and that will continue this broadening action that's sort of developing in this area where lower lows, and then maybe higher highs heading up this way. So we'll keep that in mind if that happens. Or if we stay below the green line, which is kind of below the midpoint of yesterday, and we'll watch where the pre-market range and opening price action, we could be heading lower and start going to these bigger term targets. So it's kind of very clear now how to play this going forward. Once we know the multiple time frame analysis, once we know the key, monthly level that it has to either be green above or red below. This green line is kind of everything now as the month goes on, and we'll talk about that as it develops. In the weekly chart, we reaches targets, so we kind of know we're either going to continue here or fail. But that'll all come up in relative to tomorrow's price action, I think, relative to the pre-market range and how price opens. So anyway, that's it. It's a follow-up. It was kind of a day, bottom line, where you did go short here, very nimble in terms of, because you reached your target, are you going to hold or follow through or fail? And once you saw the failure, you almost had to get out real quickly. If it was just a normal trade, you'd break even, just knowing the principle of that, or maybe the halfway point of that first bar, you get out. Then as we went up, it really never crossed the midpoint of the prior day to have a long bias. But since it took out the first high here, you had a big overnight range, you kind of knew from strat theory that you were going to take out that level at a minimum. And then the failure here shouldn't have been surprising given our overall big picture that we still have in mind to the downside. So here we go. Another, few red days in a row. And that's another thing too. You're getting exhaustion risk with each and every one of these moves to new lows. So that's why when it makes a new low here, you got to be cognizant of that as well. And that's why you could fail when you hit a little target like that. So I hope that's clear. And to me, now pretty clear what's happening going forward. We either really continue down towards those targets, which is still the bias, or we have an opportunity to really have a level here that we know we have to break above. You can almost look at it here. We have to just break above this whole area now to have any kind of upside. Other than that, stay biased to the short side, and we'll see what happens tomorrow.